Welcome to our very first Poetry Mic of the season. Thanks for being here. My name's Bryn Durgan. I'm the Director of Programming here at Bookstore1. And I know I see a lot of familiar faces here today, but just in case this is your first time at a Poetry Mic, I'll just give you a quick debrief. So the second Sunday of every month, we invite a few talented poets that live in and around the Sarasota area to come and share their work with this audience. And sometimes we're lucky enough to have a visit from a well-known poet who happens to be passing through town, as is the case today. So I'm going to introduce you to our three poets now at the top. And after they've each finished reading, they'll join each other up front to answer any questions that you might have. So first, you'll hear from Doug Knowlton, Bookstore1's very own poet laureate. Yep. Doug's been writing poems and lyrics since the 1960s. His love of poetry was reignited as he participated in readings around the Orlando area in the late 90s. He emceed the open mic at Java and Jive Coffee House in Palmetto, was a regular at Fogartyville Cafe open mic in Bradenton, and hosted the Village Bookshop Poets and Writers from 2006 to 2011. Doug enjoys facilitating workshops for writers stirred by poetry's potential and frequently offers these popular workshops here at Bookstore1. He also facilitates a monthly poetry book club here in the loft. And following Doug is Georgia Court, and she's the owner of Bookstore1, of course. Georgia retired from teaching English composition and writing for healthcare at the University of Cincinnati, but her career path included writing a weekly column about healthcare for the Cincinnati Post, a daily newspaper, publishing a weekly newspaper for healthcare professionals, and owning a PR event management company. Her first job out of college was with IBM, where she worked as a systems engineer for several years before moving on to a life in words. Georgia is the owner of Bookstore1. She's also the founder of Poetry Life, which started in 2012 as an annual event to bring the world's finest poets to Sarasota. Poetry Life is now an umbrella program that brings poetry to Sarasota audiences all year long, and Poetry Mic falls under that umbrella. And finally, we have Rick Hillis. Rick Hillis is a recipient of a Fulbright, Whiting, and the Amy Lowell Traveling Poetry Scholarship. His poems, essays, and translations have appeared in American Literary Review, 5 Points, Harper's, Kenyon Review, Literary Imagination, Narrative Magazine, New Letters, New Republic, Paris Review, the list goes on and on and on. Rick is the author of Brother Salvage, A Map of the Lost World, and 3 chapbooks, most recently, My Roberto Clemente. He teaches in the English department and MFA program at Vanderbilt University. So let's give them all a round of applause and we'll welcome Doug up.
Just diving right in. I guess I'm the opening band. This first poem is one I pulled out of the digital drawer, you might say, from 2014. It felt right for some reason. 10 years ago, when I was invincible. The first time I wrote in this palm-embossed leather blank book, there between Petons on Derek's Island, I was still invincible, writing as if I knew him, as if we were old mates, and somehow that is how it is when you dwell in another man's lines. Sprawl on his word sand, when you listen for a few days to the waves that heard the soothe of his voice, cradled his body, held his boat dormant for a moment, slapping the hull above the bar before she let it pass on to her big forever water, where destiny is always waiting. So, Derek, you taught me to mourn with purpose. Good timing, brother. 10 years ago when I was still invincible. Okay, you're not gonna like this one. I don't like it. But when I remember, I try to write a birthday poem to myself every year. And I dug this one out for this year because it just seemed like I needed to, I don't know, make fun of my own misery. You know what I'm saying? With so much news lately of pain and suffering and the hurt that others are experiencing, and the stupidity and I won't go on, but I just thought this poem just seems to hit it just right for me. We'll see if anyone else. 71st birthday poem. It is easy to love well-meaning greetings as they encourage one to have a happy, celebratory, fun birthday. I smile and almost forget how. Every night now is a stream of private Netflix episodes, one after another, packing scenes from each of my last 5 or 6 decades with no rhyme or reason, behind eyes sealed shut, which only allow a flickering standard of 24 frames per second to run without interruption. Regret is how you sack serenity and slough off joy. Who needs happiness when you have free thrillers, night after night, complete with screeching neurotransmission trains that crash and burn while your inner cells protest in the streets against the privileged corporate brain that was supposedly in charge of keeping you safe, and has instead ignored all the signs of imminent disaster. Axles and wheels screaming, coupling bolts flying off, rails ripping up into twisty snakes, flammable toxins erupting. Wake up, wake up! We're about to fly off. So that was my birthday this year. Man. Really? John E., as he was known in some poetry workshops back in the early 2000s, became a friend across the miles from California. And he asked if he couldn't publish one of my poems back in 2005. And I was elated, of course, and I thought, which one? And I was surprised that he picked the one he picked. But I hadn't had anything published in about 20 years, so I didn't care. Whatever you want, John. Anyhow, this is kind of a conversation poem, imaginary conversation poem with an old college friend about other college friends 10, 20 years on. It's called J-Dead Blues. On the shoulder of the road, a bird called idealism, or spirit, or naivete. Ah, precious naivete. Sings me back my youth. You, jaded? Hard to believe, you who never followed the road but loved those of us who had, lived in our stories, smiling $1 million smiles at our lame jokes, laughing like one of the boys even when punchlines fail. I remember Richard walking up to people on the green bowl of a campus, quoting oddly outrageous things in a stuffy accent, things like static being in the predicate form is motion passed over into repose, or telling Pecos Bill stories and imitating Elmer Fudd before anyone had even heard of Robin Williams, spinning off some Heideggerian one-liner while two slightly tilted, decidedly untheological students butchered some dead song. And then he'd remind me, don't let it bring you down, man. It's only castles burning. All the while your bright shade by my side. He called unexpectedly one night, 8 years later. while I was in the throes of that final Tennessee waltz, called from some undisclosed location and asked me to give him a reference and forget all his Osley tales and stories about the Sonoran Desert so he could join some improbable fantasy organization he called the NSA. Never heard from him again. A rusty needle scratches along a groove as the last time I saw Richard plays. And though our man wasn't in Detroit in '68 like Joni's, it was like he was in that song. And you've got a few to write too, if only you weren't so good at outrunning the blues. Let him come around once in a while, damn it, let him howl. Find a dark cafe down in the Delta, feel something, and blow the dust off that piano. J-Dead Blues. So last one, another song, right? Okay. This is just a song on the radio, and it's a riddle song, and you have to guess what the song is, and whatever you come up with is right. Because the reader and listener are always right? Yeah, it's like customer. Just a song on the radio. It was just a song on the radio, like any other song that summer, except that when the sailor's voice rose over the waves like a Kaddish cantor, like some hymn spin-off, Bach-like majestic, boys stopped their backyard hoops, their games of HORSE and PIG, holding the dirty orange rubber spheres under arms as the sound came from that AM radio first used when Shepard blasted beyond the atmosphere, beyond these things. And whether it was Cousin Brucey or Murray or Mirtha Surf or whoever on WABC, the whole city stooped to a standstill, bending in, close listening as if to love's last call. Were the lyrics about how we love, or a drunken voyage of doom, a marriage dance in triple time, or some bold hallucinatory parable of our generation? It was the summer of love. The summer of Monterey, the summer Sergeant Pepper's ruled and Dane the Life led Reed's lyric to that Brooke Carrion tune to the top. Yeah, it was on that little brown leatherette radio, and yet we heard the hymn of our age that made us stop and listen. What was it about that song which joined improbably with our own lives so that every time it played again in the 50 years since, one man remembers shooting hoops, straining to listen over the cushy rubber concussion of the ball, attending every word as heat ripples shimmered off melting pavement, and a recollection returns of going indoors to the corner room beneath looming mulberry to write that brown-eyed girl in Glastonbury. Just a song on the radio.
All right. A little closer for my short self. Okay. I'm so glad to see all of you here. By the way, I wanted to remind some of you who may be interested of a couple of things coming up. On November 5th, Richard Blanco will be with us. He will be in the house reading from his newest book of poetry, so remember to sign up for that. You can do that, of course, on our website. And also, Phil Terman, the fabulous poet from Pennsylvania and parts north, is going to be teaching a workshop, a poetry writers workshop for a week here, and that starts November 6th. So it's a 5-day workshop, and there are some spaces in it. And I hope some of you, if you're interested, might take a look and sign up for it. He is truly a terrific teacher of poetry. He's a former professor of poetry, and he's the founder of the Writers' Festival at the Chautauqua Institution. So he's a guy who knows his way around words. So I suggest you look into that if you have any interest at all. Okay, I'm going to read a few poems, and several of them, the first several, are about construction. I've always been interested in construction and love to watch construction projects, actually. And in 2020, I guess, during the height of the pandemic, there was a major construction project going on in this city. It was the installation of the infrastructure for lift station 87. How many of you remember that? The Osprey Bridge was closed. Osprey Avenue was closed for a year and a half or something. Well, we live quite close to there. So I could look out my window and see what was going on, and I loved it. The neighbors didn't, but I did. I actually loved it. So these first few poems are about watching that process. The first one is called Closing Osprey Bridge. First sign is the sign the city moves into place. Local traffic only, it says, blinking its message in yellow, warning out-of-towners to stay away. I watch trucks roll in, loaded with lengths of pipe, coils of wire. Young men from Texas in hard hats step out of pickups, survey the site, sip coffee from paper cups, lean against their F-150s, shiny from the dealership, bought on credit, with the promise this job will last for months, at least until spring, the one with the best drawl tells me. He seems happy to be here with a good job and a new pickup. He tells me about the girlfriend back home, the premium he's paid for working far away, and how when this job is done, he'll be able to marry his girl in Abilene. And I feel happy too, as the young man, the one with the hard hat and the drawl, wishes me a good day, turns away to begin his work. I picture him and her in a year or so, driving away from the church, their families waving as they pick up speed, roses loaded into the truck bed. So here we are several weeks later on this project, and this is called Lift Station 87 Project First Day. It took them a couple weeks to get all this equipment unloaded, okay, all these wires and pipes and so forth, and they stretched them out the length of Osprey. Actually, it's quite interesting. And there were multiple colors. I do have some poems about the different colors they were. It was very festive, actually. So this one is called Lift Station 87 Project First Day. And on the first day, they arrive in pickup trucks, lean on them, chatting in Spanish, their yellow hard hats shining in Florida sun. Entonces, big trucks begin to arrive, the kind of trucks 5-year-old boys dream of, the kind of trucks in libros ilustrados por infantes, those trucks bearing gigante equipment on wheels. They unload bulldozers, excavators, backhoes, and los hombres no longer lean against their F-150s, their dream equipment now arranged on the barricaded street, ready for them to take turns in the driver's seat. So we're back at the construction site, and this is called Construction Site 7:15 a.m., which is the time that they all gathered to start work. 8 men kneel in a circle, heads bowed, yellow hard hats and safety vests glow in light made soft by early autumn mist. Behind them, more yellow waits in the giant bodies of Komatsu excavators, engines readied to resume a day of moving earth from one side to another, shifting the balance of the planet one full shovel at a time. These men know their place, small beneath this equipment. They rise from their knees, make the sign of the cross, begin their day. And that happened every morning, every morning. This is construction site day 135. 4 men in hard hats raised a sheet of plywood toward the heavens, like a ritual to appease the god of construction. Carefully, they lowered it back toward earth, an offering to seek protection for those who need traverse the deep pit of their making. And it came to pass on that day that the earth the men had loosed from those pits became unsettled, floated upon the wind. It coated people who moved over the newly covered rents where once there had been a street, coated homes that had been wrought with care decades before, coated the lungs of anyone who walked by, left them coughing grit into Kleenex. And so it went, covering, uncovering, digging, covering again, until the boss might say, enough, go home, rejoice at the work you've done. And one final one in this set, I was always amazed at how these men arrived and worked, and they were a really lovely bunch of guys, always cheerful with each other and greeting people, and so it was hard work. It was kind of a festive place in a way, but they also came to work on what I thought were some dangerous conditions sometimes. So this is about that, and this is called Working in the Rain. And there he was, his workman's yellow slicker streaming rain in a streetlight's glare. He wore a hat like a lobsterman, gear needed now that a threatened hurricane had arrived from the west. The toothed wheel of a circular saw spun through concrete, controlled by his wet hands as he crouched under a blue umbrella, the kind you see at sidewalk cafes when sun is the reason for shelter, when no one is in danger of a slip of the wrist. It poured. He didn't stop. I watched from my dry living room, wondered what his mother would say if she knew what he was doing. The son she promised to protect. The boy who begged for a chainsaw without success the last Christmas he lived at home. The son who never forgot to cut flowers for her birthday. A little more construction, but in a different location. I'm building a house in the north, and it's going onto an empty lot that's wasn't empty because it's loaded with trees and brush and stuff. So the guys had to come and clear that out, and this is just this fall. So this is called Clearing the Lot. And there are a lot of hard hats in my poems, I noticed. Here's another one in the first line. Sorry about that. Okay. They come wearing hard hats, the crew from Maple Springs. They come in trucks hauling chippers, have chainsaws they keep running at the ready. They spray flamingo pink in circles on trees that need to come down right away. Cherries, the boss says, worst offenders, total weaklings. One man carries red flags to mark those that stay, but some healthy specimens must be felled to build a house that is still only a drawing. It was sketched by hand, then rendered in distinct dimensions by an architect with sophisticated software to set down the borders of my life in straight lines. And that's how the guys from Maple Springs understand my boundaries and where they'll be by next summer and how much light will shine on my new home. And just a couple more poems. This one is post-construction. Same area in the north. There was a house that was rebuilt across the street from me and it was originally bright pink. It got rebuilt and was painted a lovely blue. And this poem is about that house. And it's called Awakening Early on the First Day of Fall. The bishop's house across the street is quiet beneath its new blue paint, all its lights doused. The bishop is a careful man. He remembers important things. From this angle, I can see the street. A river birch I planted 2 seasons ago has widened. Its soft branches appear to my left. I can't see its paper peel bark, but can conjure it from memory. Hydrangeas, the white ones I see from here, are turning pink, a sign they will dry well after their robust summer bloom. How tired they must be, holding up their heavy heads since June. In the soundtrack of my thoughts, a wall clock ticks its cliche. I'm awake. I'm awake, the only one at this hour. But then I hear one bird call, loud. Another creature is awake. If I sit here long enough, the sun may rise over the holy man's house, and the light mist might clear. And I'm going to read just 2 more, because I always like to do political poems. So the first one is a political memory from when I was a really little kid. Okay. This is called Voting with My Mother. Most years, she pulled the lever and voted a straight ticket, me beside her, tugging at her winter jacket, the morning outside leaning toward Thanksgiving, candidate flyers like leaves from a pin oak littering the concrete walk. On those days, she'd take out the car. She'd pick up grandmothers who couldn't drive, take them to the polls, try to talk with them on the way. I wondered if she understood what they had to say, the warm air of the Cadillac's heater thickening their old country accents in my ear. She wanted Stevenson, got Eisenhower. Wanted Humphrey, got Nixon. Wanted McGovern, got Nixon. Wanted all the politicians with no chance, but every November kept driving neighbors, kept voting, kept pulling that lever. And finally, one more current day. So, this is called Watching the First Republican Presidential Debate, August 23rd, 2023. We hadn't intended to gorge on pretzels and dip and cheese, but it seemed that bad food was required. Like you need lots of popcorn at a Stephen King flick, our mouths wanting to be full lest we roar at the screen where the so-called debate was like a food fight. One old man intoned in Jesus' name. A skinny youngster couldn't calm down And in the middle, the most hopeful lost the spotlight despite the millions his backers spent to make sure America understood we are at war with books and knowledge and love. The audience in Milwaukee booed and cheered and took the whole thing to heart because they knew this is how we make our choice, by game show complete with buzzer. But maybe better to hold a wrestling match in Madison Square Garden, where the fat man from New Jersey could sit on that skinny loudmouth, where the woman on stage could use her stilettos to stomp the aging little boys into behaving. Thank you.
Oh my God. Oh, that was so wonderful. Can we have some more applause for our first two readers? And actually, big thanks to, of course, well, Bryn for the beautiful introductions, Georgia, my poetry mom, for making this oasis, right? Speaking of all the political poems, places like this feel all the more necessary in times when the world seems more mad than ever, right? And I cherish this place so much, and what a thrill to be back here. I guess I also, while I'm saying thank yous, I want to thank the people who are over there, James and Andrea and Elsie. James, thank you for that wonderful espresso. It made all the difference. I want to read some older poems, like older friends first, and then some newer poems that I've maybe one poem I've only read once, and that was to Robin and Georgia. What a sweetness for me, I have to say. Georgia's my poetry mom, and getting time with her, and with Robin now, and with Bill, and with my uncle friend Peter, it's just such a sustenance. Again, coming back to the sanctuaries we go to when, again, the world is a little too crazy. So buy books, buy lots of books, buy banned books, write banned books, please. Hey, I'm hoping my books will get banned. And poetry books, what could be better than to have a banned book? Sometimes it's good to begin with something, I don't know, just a little different. And looking kind of at all of you, it feels like this might be just a fun poem to read. Poetry can be fun, right? Can it? So this is for a friend who on his 50th birthday received a book with the title Sex After 50, in which, when he opened the book, all the pages were blank. So this is called Sex After 50. It's a lot better than you might think, especially if the thought of it makes you a little queasy. For one thing, your looks are just starting to get interesting, and everything else that's starting to sag, wilt, or whatever was never really what it was about in the first place. While it may be nice to dream that you will just lean into the splendor of sensations in total darkness, most times it's better to leave the light on and reflect on how much more comfortable you are in your skin, not to mention somebody else's. So, while you're still holding the universe in place on its axis, the two of you now pinned to each other and your shadows, holding everything, including even the outmoded notions that could use a little more entertaining these days, like the music of the spheres, which will sing its immortal shape into you a little more each time you come to know love in rapturous sex after 50. I can't wait to write like the companion poem, like Sex After 90. I mean, I am here for it. I mentioned that for the weekend, the extended weekend, I've had this great pleasure of getting to live with this extended family that I cherish so much, but also Bill Buckman is in our house. He's in this house too, a wonderful painter and musician, and I thought I would read a poem. If Walter Pater was right in saying that poetry aspires to the condition of music, I still feel like I'm learning what that even means, What is the condition of music? I think I listen to music, and wondrous music, right, just does something almost alchemical to us. So I live for that. Anyway, in my teens, I was in a number of very bad garage bands. It was so much fun to make noise. So the title of this poem is just sort of like what I had to work with at the time. The title is Fender Strat with Wah-Wah, Fuzzbox, and Whammy Bar. It already sounds like magic is involved, right, with a whammy bar. Fender Strat with Wah-Wah, Fuzzbox, and Whammy Bar. A smeared note swells and scatters like a voice inside a cave, tugging the vibrato bar till the sound divides like an egg yolk dropped in broth. Inside you now, swirling like a geyser trapped in earth before the whole thing blows apart. As if the spirit world will talk back to you the more you face the amp and lean into yourself. You think there are so many ways to pray. This being, of course, another lining up of hands, another way to take the vagrant silence in yourself and make it deafening. Now it is the whole house breaking in the sound of surf, the echoes rattling the bookshelves, even without the sound. Last night at dinner, Bill was talking to us about, he went to Woodstock. He was there. I mean, there's that line of Robin Williams, like, if you remember the 60s, you weren't there, but he remembers, which is amazing. Although Woodstock was a little was like 70 or something? 69, so just at the edge. So he remembers 1969, how about that? It was thrilling to hear his stories of that. I have, I think, another poem I want to read that's an older friend before getting to newer friends. This one I want to dedicate to my uncle friend, Peter Hooten. This is a bizarre thing. Isn't it kind of remarkable the longer you live and the world seems smaller and cozier and more intimate at times? So years before I met Peter, I had a residency at the poet. Have you heard of the poet James Merrill? Maybe a number of you have. His dad was the Merrill of Merrill Lynch. I had a teacher once say, "He was born on third base, James Merrill." But the same teacher said, what he did with being born on third base is he mastered English poetry. He became one of our great poets, I think. And after he passed away, the top 2 floors of the building that he owned and where he lived were turned into an artist residence center. So I got to stay there for a semester, and they were changing out the old refrigerator. And I just was sort of sweeping up after, and I saw these words in the dust, and I thought, oh my God, this is a little spooky and interesting. And the 3 words were crimson and ring and touch. And only years later, and after writing this poem, I talked to Peter about it. He said, oh, that's from the magnetic poetry set that I bought James. It was actually an erotic poetry set, so I think I got the 3 tamest words. Maybe, I don't know. But so this poem comes out of that. The given was what I just told you. Excuse me. So the title is From 3 Words of a Magnetic Poetry Set, Found Caked in Dirt beneath James Merrill's last refrigerator. It's true, there is no substitute for touch, for the kiss that sets the world in motion. One caress is all it takes. Watch any nurse in a delivery ward. Each warm fingerprint is gift. Whole histories of the heart could be devoted to what passes in an instant, from the snow of old skin tumbling, like dazed moths in a blizzard of sunlight, to what turns crimson when the lit red fuse passes from lip to tongue, in a kiss first registered as shock, then recognized, taken in seen, as when your true love says, your lips, a kissable music, before nodding off, leaving your mouth that inflamed right monogram of oh, an unkissed wish, but the tremor in your bones restored, the residue of touch, the lipstick crimson rings, a nutrient set to spreading in an instant, or at the promise of the touch to come, a single note struck in the choir of itself, when made to sing in us, is madrigal, a resonance of every clear perception of the world, even disappointment, which might otherwise make for a language cacophonous. But when such sound takes residence in us, the resonance instead becomes the love we can do least without, the color of a tapped black note, a surface shaped in pressure, fissure, fault of pigment, ink, a single stroke, hoisted in the rafters of the mind, which is just another way to know the origin of touch as curative. Being a little touched, clearly, is unavoidable, but like a constellation reflected perfectly in a wading pool, then blurred, stirred by hand, the silver rings turn crimson in a heart exposed, as if by touch alone, one person, one life might keep the world in motion. That's one of those poems that feels like, clearly I got carried away by the language, but don't we sometimes live for that a bit? I mean, the carrying away part. And even, I suppose, a poem that celebrates like just one person's intervention, what that can do on a life. And again, thinking about this wonderful weekend I've been having with beloved people, I guess in many ways it's a poem to many and to you guys in many ways. I have no idea how this will influence me or even you all, but hopefully it will set something good in motion for you too. Let me consult the time. I think we're doing reasonably well. I should probably read just a few more poems. And if you don't mind, maybe I'll just turn to more recent poems. I have this newer poetry manuscript. It's really going to be its unveiling. Like I've not read any of these poems except for the first poem to Georgia and Robin. Goodness. I'm gonna, I think, start with the first poem in the collection. It's called Custodians. I keep wanting to go down to it.
Do you want to move it up?
Is it okay if I do?
Yeah, of course.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, thank you. That's lovely. Wow. I can stand more.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. That's lovely. Custodians. The boy I was is now almost gone. Yet everything I've done and will do is because of him. But to find that boy again, I must dredge up the bundle I was at 14, and my first job as a custodian at St. Paul's Pre-K. Mom's on disability. It's just the three of us, and I'm oldest, so I work. And already my 4th summer there, I imagine every crush I've ever had in their bikinis, lounging by swimming pools, rubbing coconut oil into their bare skin, glistening in the hot sun as I scrub every wall, every hall, each locker down, any surface that still shines with their attention. Every touch, fingerprint, scuff of penny loafer as they turn back to the beauty of their lives, soon in my hands will amount to nothing but a thin film in lukewarm water, a grease that nevertheless rainbows each time I look into its surface. Even in the braid of water, I see it as I empty the bucket in the broom closet sink. By my 6th summer, I see my future in urinals. Each toilet I flush, everything that will come to pass in the mini hurricanes of indigo. I'll find years later in Vermeer's Delft blue. I see my future in the bubblegum I pry from chairs and desks, and maybe only now do I see what Mom conceals from us in meals that keep us from wanting more, that what feels like a prison sentence commuted to community service is for the crime of posing as middle class in the affluent suburbs when we are poor. Dad lets Mom keep the house, and while he skews us to conspicuous wealth each time he pops the clutch of his Bimmer into park in Mom's driveway to pick us up for weekend custody visits, I know precisely where we stand when he drops us off and Mom sends me right back outside to ask him when this month's child support check will arrive. Dad worked as a kid too, and though we never speak of it, I like to think he likes me more for working. But my being a janitor, I think, makes him scowl or look for something in his lap. The custodians I meet treat me like a grandson. One Friday lunch, an old-timer working on his 3rd pension after the Army and Republic Steel surprises me with a cold, old frothing slosh to go with my fish and chips. I have more lunches with him than with my own father. The summer I turned 21, my 9th one there, I grow my hair long, pulled back, copper brown, straight. I fill out my t-shirt and faded blue jeans. My supers this summer in the Canton Art Museum are lifers, maybe twice my age and bigger around the arms and chest. The loading dock's garage door is open. Bright light and traffic noise seep in. We sit around an old teacher's desk eating lunch. The one with the dark wilderness beard says he's just gone off coffee. It makes me want to hit somebody, anybody, he says. His sidekick laughs, his hair a gray wreath of smoke, and he stands. As I choke down another forgettable sandwich, he leans in and says, "You know where they like you long hairs, don't you?" His eyes go flat black, and something like a silver dollar spins between them. Shadows dart across the walls. A thermos hits the floor. Are they really chasing me? Is this a joke? Are they trying to rape me? when the one with the wilderness beard grabs me by the forearm. He holds it like a cold one he's ready to crack open. I rest free, I run. Somehow the one with the beard, dark, but for a few veins of lightning, finds me. He can't look at me, but leaves a peace offering, a soapy bucket of water, warm water, and a new sponge. He wants the narrow hallway to be cleaned. I climb as high as I can on my knees, sloshing walls up to the skylight until they rainbow to the cleanest regions inside myself, and I see a life that I might live beyond the world of men. Oh, thank you. Oh. Sorry, that was kind of intense, I know, but at least it was intense for me. I have a little bit of time left. I guess it's about 5 till. And no one ever wants to feel like a poetry reading is like a hostage situation, right? So sometimes people say they're going to read a couple more poems, and I should. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. I thought you were going to hand me a cigarette. After that, probably. I don't even smoke, and it kind of seems like that would be right. I will drink it in real time. Total gratitude. Georgia read a political poem, and I love political poems. I don't know that I write enough of them. Excuse me. For me, I think almost all poetry is kind of political in the sense that it's a way of pushing back against nefarious energies, I think, for me. And I'm grateful for them when they do that. I don't want to invoke this person, but you all know who I'm talking about. During this person's administration, which was, I don't even want to talk about it too much, but I felt like I needed to up my poetry practice. I needed to write more. Forgive this verb, I think needed to unfuck myself after, a time when I think language was really contorted and abused. And I guess, it's interesting. John Edgar Wideman, is he a writer you guys know? And wonderful writer of fiction and nonfiction. I remember though being at a reading once, he said, I write fiction to prove to myself that there are other uses for language than to lie. And I think, holy shit, I do the same thing with poetry every time I sit down to write, right? So anyway, during this time I was writing poems to unfuck myself. I was writing odes to things that I thought, I don't know how I would ever praise that. And then it became this practice of learning to praise things that didn't seem immediately worthy of praise. So I had one to this idea of misunderstanding, which is in my new manuscript. But this one might be more fun to read. It's called To Disenchantment. Also, to being disenchanted, it doesn't seem inherently like something that would be praiseworthy, but I have fun with it. And I'm always wishing, I suppose, for these things to happen to the people maybe I'll just call the unlovely ones. To Disenchantment. And this has a little skyhook under it from Joseph Brodsky. The future is propaganda, so is grass. And you may notice in the poem, I love Walt Whitman, I love Leaves of Grass, but there's a moment where maybe I'm thinking that grass is a very different thing now than what it was in Whitman's time, and maybe in some ways we could think of it as a bit like propaganda. Anyway, To Disenchantment. I praise the sham in shambles, the hoax exposed, the huckster's smirk, and the illusionist's oops. And when a cow pie lands in the right face, I praise the scam that scrams, the jilted lover who disregards the teleprompters and clearly goes for broke as they cut to an infomercial. And I praise that I'm not even tempted to be sold, but if I were, please throw a very wet sock at me. I praise the sunset that moves behind a cloud and the grass that Whitman so loved, even if Joseph Brodsky was right, it is propaganda. Forgive me, Uncle Walt. I know that's not what you meant, but what for you was a uniform hieroglyphic is now a DDT tautology. I praise those who walk back others' tantrums, clearly lying when they say they are joking. And I praise all nascent immune systems that need our germs to realize themselves, and bright ideas conceived in funhouse mirrors. I praise the romance delayed to drive up ratings, the shamelessly sleazy ad campaign, the easy to sniff out rhetoric of church and state. I praise those who are equally unconvinced that we'll ever know what happened in our lifetimes. And I praise the unlovely fragrance it all exudes, revealing just enough for us to know it's bogus. And I praise even the evidence that never arrives, all bunk defunct, all ballyhoo removed. And I praise what at once raises my red flags, even the cringeworthy salesman's trust me. But I will gladly greet the first man, woman, or child who approaches me without cunning or guile or subterfuge of any kind to say something I've never heard before, maybe even something about the grass, fetching it for me with both hands, saying, "Hey, mister, do you know what this is?" And I will revel in how far we're willing to go to see the grass together, as through a microscope in which we see the fire in every cell igniting us too. All right. Okay. How is it feeling? Like, it's not a hostage situation yet, is it? Do you have time for one more, maybe? Okay. Thank you. So, this book that I'm still putting finishing touches on, but I think is really, really, really close, you might imagine, has a lot of poems that are, a bit about tending to parents who are in their sort of, I hate even using this expression, but twilight chapters, My father is currently in an assisted living situation, and my mom, we've been able to keep in her home, which is fantastic. Anyway, this summer I was at a residency center in northern Italy, and maybe you've had these moments certainly where you're in this most beautiful place and you wish you could bring your loved ones with you so they could be there to enjoy it as much as you are. So this is called Baliasco, named for the place where I was. Baliasco, the real feeling I have beyond gratitude that lasts the more I see this emerald coast in daylight or at night, Brancusi moon, first stars, a cooling breeze, is how guilty I feel that I'm the one who gets to see it and not my mother, now mostly living in her chair, which makes me rub my eyes as I watch the sunset. And because I'm nothing if not my mother's son, I think of how much she'd love this coast and her one painting I know of that survives, its lean box open in the basement, of a white Hokusai wave breaking on dark rocks by the sea. Just thinking of it, I start to feel another breeze across my skin, giving me goose flesh. The ease of it conjures the heart of her painting, a red sunset where already parts of paint flake off. Now see how in this painting, likely to be my mother's last, that the sunset itself now has become so bright, it's burning through the canvas, singeing the air. Once I saw midnight in my mother's hair, and copper highlights bright as a custodian's keys to rooms that opened for her in another life I don't have access to. So I stand out in the sun and hope this sudden illumination of her will last at least long enough for us to begin to see past the rooms of darkness to those holding mercy for my mother and myself, for all of us. The fresh air here helps me imagine a place more luminous and vast, whose shutters, even in trompe-l'oeil, open with ease, so I can imagine her taking in this glorious sunset from the chair she's mostly confined to now in her life. And don't we want our mothers to know a good life and its mercies? And aren't we happiest by the sea, where all the reflected light from the relentless sun shines for them, and the whole turquoise surface, sapphires, our mother's hair, so alive now in the breeze? How I pray a moment as good as this will be her last. And even if her painting at last crumbles into the sea, I am her mother's son, and so I carry her and her image like keys that find new uses wherever I go.